Hi, guys. Today we're going to be talking about communication and how it relates to my career as a property manager. So, communication, as we all know, is how we relate to one another. And in the business world, it's especially important because it's how we make sure that we're all on the same page to achieve the directives and objectives of the organization that we represent. So, for me in the property management industry, there's really three main groups that I communicate with, and I'm going to discuss each of them and then tell you the ways in which I communicate with them. So, the first main group that I communicate with as a property manager would be with my residents, my customers. Um, I interact with them on a daily basis, person to person, through verbal communication when they come into the office. And along with that verbal communication, I have to be especially noticeful of my nonverbal communication because even if I have a smile on my face when I'm interacting with them, how I'm acting towards them nonverbally can betray the tone of voice and the words that I'm saying. So, in order to come across as genuine and as somebody who they can trust and as somebody who's knowledgeable, I have to be very mindful of both of those factors. Another way that I communicate with my residents is through writing, through letters and memos and things like that. So, for written communication with my residents, I always try to use a professional tone. I always try to make sure that what I'm saying to them is factual, and I always try to make sure that it's easily understood. Um, One of the things I always tell my staff about communicating with my residents is that I don't tell them anything based on expectations. I only tell them things that I know to be true. I don't want to set an expectation and then not be able to follow through. So I'm very mindful of that, both with written and oral communication with them, that I am being clear and that what I'm telling them is backed up with facts. The second main group that I communicate with in my career is with my subordinate employees. At the property that I run, I have a staff of about 5 employees, and the main way that we communicate again is verbal. I do this by hosting a weekly staff meeting where we go through department by department. We talk about what's happening in that department, what my expectations are, and any issues that they're facing that I might not know about. Um, Part of communication with my staff is to open up the floor to allow them to communicate with me and make sure that they know that the lines of communication are open and that they go two ways. So when I have my staff meeting, I invite them to participate. I ask for them to give me their input, and I try to be as clear and thorough in explaining everything that I can to them and not withhold any information. Um, when dealing with subordinate staff, it's important that they trust you and that they look up to you as a leader. So, how you communicate with them, that you're talking to them in an appropriate tone, and that you're not demeaning them or withholding information because you feel your status as a manager is more important to them. They pick up on those kinds of things. So, when you're interacting with them, it's very important that you're conscientious of that. The third group that I communicate with is with my superiors, which would be the staff at my corporate office. The main line of communication that I have with them is via email. So, again, we're going back to that written form of communication. We use email because it's easy to exchange information. We can include attachments, send documents, things like that, and it also creates a paper trail. So if there's ever an instance where there's a question about a conversation that was had, or we need documentation of being told something by a superior, we have that paper trail created for us through the email chain. One thing to be mindful of when using email, especially in the business world that I've found, is that your tone of voice is not always clear. So you want to always make sure that you are being professional and that you're speaking to the point, but you want to be conscientious of the word choice that you're using because it's easy for what you're saying to be misconstrued. I've had differences with supervisors, coworkers, and subordinates because the tone of voice that they gave to me or that I gave to them came across differently when they read it than what I intended. So, with written communication, it's very important, and email is a perfect example of that, to be mindful of how the other person may perceive the message that you're giving them. The other main form of communication that I use with my corporate office is telephone communication, which is a verbal form of communication. It takes that lack of inflection that you have with email. It makes it easier for you to understand the person that you're communicating with on the other line. But again, it's not as personal as the face-to-face communication that I have with my residents. So you can get away with a little bit more. You don't have to worry quite as much about your nonverbal body language when you're on the telephone, but you do still have to pay attention to your tone of voice and make sure that your word choice and what you are saying comes across as clear and professional. So, in my role as a property manager, those are the three main groups that I interact with. Once again, that was my residents, my subordinate staff, and my corporate office. And the main means of communication which I use, which would be in person meetings, letters or memos, staff meetings, email, and telephone communication. Thank you.